I am Sarah Thompson, 24, and in my final business administration semester at Westfield University. I grew up in a quiet Michigan town, believing my family's support was unwavering. But on graduation day, the auditorium's cheers felt empty. Backstage, diploma case in hand, I remembered every late night study session and extra shift that brought me to this moment. When my name echoed, I stepped forward under the stage lights, my smile hiding burning resentment. Moments earlier, my father had leaned toward my sister and said, "We're funding Maddie's master's," handing her a check for $100,000. The gift gleamed like a knife in my palm. I stood there, applauding, but inside, I was disappearing into their shadow. Suddenly, pride and fury collided, and I vowed then and there to force them to face their mistake. As I walked across the stage, I realized that my greatest victory would be making them regret ever underestimating me. But to understand why I hated my family so much, first, let's go back to the warmest days. I can still taste the sweet tang of cranberry sauce on my tongue whenever I close my eyes and think back to those Thanksgiving evenings at Grandma Maggie's house. The long oak dining table would be laid with her favorite embroidered runner and surrounded by mismatched chairs, each bearing the faint imprint of generations past. My sister Maddie and I would jockey for the seat closest to the fireplace, where the firelight danced off Grandma Maggie's silver hair. Outside, the wind whipped against the clapboard siding of her little lake house, but inside it felt as though the rest of the world had paused, every stray worry hushed by the smell of roasting turkey, the crackle of logs, and the soft murmur of family stories. When I was 8, Grandma Maggie took my chubby hand and guided me into her little art studio, a converted shed at the edge of her property. Sunlight filtered through dust-speckled windows, illuminating half-finished canvases and jars of brushes stained with dried paint. She handed me a fine-tipped brush and a small block of watercolor paper. "Sarah," she said, leaning close so I could hear every word, "your creativity is a gift. Don't ever let anyone make you feel otherwise." I remember the warmth of her encouragement, how her voice felt like a secret promise that I could be more than any label someone else tried to pin on me. From that day on, I carried her words with me like a talisman. At 10, I saved every dollar I earned, mowing lawns, $5 per yard, and walking Mrs. Donovan's poodle for $8 a stroll. I stashed my earnings in a mint green tin under my bed, dreaming of investing it in art supplies, a set of Winsor and Newton watercolors for $120, a stack of stretched canvases at $30 a piece. Maddie teased me gently. "You're gonna have to buy a bigger tin if you keep hoarding like that, Sarah." But she never asked to raid my stash. Instead, she'd find me in our backyard, palette in hand, painting a makeshift easel perched on crates, and she'd sit beside me, offering the occasional paint-splattered compliment. By middle school, my passion for art had blended with a fascination for storytelling. I joined the school newspaper club to illustrate cartoons alongside the student-written articles, swiftly earning a reputation for my whimsical sketches of school life. My art teacher, Mrs. Patel, recognized something in me beyond talent. She saw dedication. When I won the regional Best Young Illustrator Award at 14, she called my parents with pride in her voice. Mom grinned when she got the call, but Dad didn't look up from his evening paper. "That's great, sweetheart," he said, as though he were congratulating someone else's daughter. "Did you finish your science homework?" I nodded, disappointed that my honor had already merged into his checklist of responsibilities. High school brought bigger challenges. I balanced a rigorous course load for advanced placement classes and a part-time internship at a local marketing agency where I earned $600 each summer. I poured every extra cent into my artist fund, buying journals, sketchbooks, and online courses in graphic design. The summer before senior year, I turned a corner. Dr. Samuel Carter, a professor at Westfield University, offered me a paid research assistant position in his entrepreneurship lab for $1,200 a month. There, I learned to translate creative ideas into real world business plans, how to identify a gap in the market, pitch to potential investors, and build sustainable revenue models. My world expanded beyond brushstrokes. I saw how stories and strategy could combine to create something that lasted. Meanwhile, Maddie flourished in her own right. She had a knack for numbers and diplomacy, qualities that made her the star of our debate team. Coaches and teachers raved about her. Our parents beamed when she won tournaments, and every accolade she earned felt like another trophy on display in our home, though always hers, never mine. I cheered for her as loud as anyone, but there was a small, growing ache each time I realized my own victories registered as background noise. When graduation loomed, I had a 3.9 GPA, a scholarship totaling $15,000, and glowing recommendations from both Mrs. Patel and Dr. Carter. I rented a cozy studio apartment for $650 a month, half a mile from campus, and split weekly groceries with Maddie, meticulously tracking our $120 food budget on a shared spreadsheet. Sundays were sacred. I'd FaceTime Grandma Maggie, showing her digital scans of my latest portfolio entries, a misty watercolor of the campus lake at dawn, a logo concept for a sustainable coffee startup. She'd whistle in delight and say, "Your future is as bright as your brushstrokes, my dear." Every small triumph felt like a step toward proving my worth. Dad occasionally recognized me in passing. "Nice work on that presentation, Sarah," he'd say. But Mom still reserved her warmest praise for Maddie's achievements. During our final family dinner before college, Dad said in a serious tone, "We're so proud of both of you. Let's make sure you both have what you need." I nodded, believing that meant we were equals now. In reality, it meant Maddie would get a full ride to Westfield while I would piece together loans, grants, and part-time jobs to cover my share. Even so, the memories of those cozy winters at Grandma Maggie's lake house, her gentle urgings in the art studio, the sound of her knitting needles clicking as she told me stories of her own youthful ambitions, remained my anchor. They reminded me that my journey, however uneven, was mine to own and shape. I carried that conviction into senior spring, determined to write my own definition of success. But then, the first sign of trouble appeared during what was supposed to be a routine family planning meeting, an ordinary afternoon that would change everything. I still remember the afternoon as if it were etched in amber. It was Wednesday, April 15th, and the robin's egg blue sky promised nothing but sunshine. I walked into our family dining room, clutching a spiral-bound binder. My 5-year business plan, complete with financial projections showing $200,000, 0 cents in first-year revenue. My heart raced with anticipation. After years of scholarship applications, late-night budgeting, and countless cups of burnt coffee as a barista, I was finally ready to present my vision. My parents sat at the head of the table, their plates pushed aside. Maddie lounged on the couch with her laptop, earbuds in place, oblivious to my nerves. I took a deep breath and began. "I've outlined every expense, every revenue stream, and the investor pitch deck is polished. If we secure a $30,000 0 cent seed grant, I can launch my digital design agency this summer and break even by year's end." Mom nodded, her expression polite. Dad folded his arms. He never let his face betray a flicker of emotion. Once I finished, silence settled like a heavy quilt. I waited for applause, or at least a, "That's impressive, Sarah." Instead, Dad leaned forward and cleared his throat. "We've been reviewing Maddie's plans," he said, glancing at my sister, who quickly removed one earbud. "She's applying for Stanford's master's program in communications, and we've agreed to fund her entirely. We'll cover her $120,000, 0 cents tuition and living expenses over 2 years." My chest tightened. My binder slipped an inch on the table. Maddie's eyes widened. Her lips curled into an unsteady smile. "Dead, really?" she whispered. Mom reached over and squeezed her hand. "Absolutely," she said. "We'd never want you to take on debt." I blinked twice. The words "take on debt" echoed in my mind like a verdict I already knew. I swallowed hard. So that means you're not considering my plan? I asked, attempting calm. Dad looked at me, his gaze unreadable. We're proud of both of you, he said, but Maddie's education is a guaranteed investment. Your future, however, you've handled on your own so far. I forced a smile. Of course, Maddie beamed. I stood, excusing myself, to the kitchen. Their voices trailed behind me, Mom fussing over casserole dishes, Dad making small talk about his golf game. I retreated to the back porch, fumbling for my phone. The evening air had turned cool around 53 degrees Fahrenheit. I dialed Dr. Carter, my mentor in Westfield's entrepreneurship lab. Dr. Carter, they're funding Maddie's full tuition, but they won't back my startup, I whispered into the receiver. He paused. Sarah, he said, voice steady. You've earned every scholarship and grant. I'll see what alternative funding we can uncover. Don't lose faith. I hung up, half relieved, but more determined that I'd find a way without their help. For the next week, I threw myself into research. I drafted grant applications, tweaked pitch decks, and cold emailed 3 potential angel investors. I worked 12-hour days in my studio apartment in 810 corner of our rented duplex while Maddie attended her networking events. Her Instagram stories, a parade of champagne toasts and congratulatory banners. At Sunday dinner, the pattern repeated. Maddie described her campus tour in Silicon Valley. Dad asked follow-up questions about lab facilities. Then Dad turned to me. Any updates on your funding? He asked carelessly. I felt my throat close. I'm waiting to hear back from a $25,000 0-cent small business grant I managed. Mom smiled sympathetically as though I'd confessed a minor inconvenience. I'm sure it'll come through, she said, turning attention back to Maddie's upcoming fellowship interview. One evening, I found Mom chatting with her book club on FaceTime, praising Maddie's accomplishments. It's such a relief she won't have to worry about loans, Mom said, beaming. Sarah's scholarships are wonderful, but she's always been so independent. Independence, I wanted to scream. If independence meant self-funding while my sister sailed ahead, I would claw my way to success and make them regret overlooking me. On April 29th, a week before graduation, Maddie burst into my apartment, waving a formal acceptance letter printed on cream-colored cardstock. Sarah, I got in! Stanford's communications program starts this fall. She looked at me expectantly, the same way I used to look at Grandma Maggie when I finished a painting. I reached out to hug her, but my arms stayed at my sides. That's amazing, Maddie. Congratulations, I said, voice flat. Inside, anger roiled, years of equal effort dismissed in favor of her guaranteed success. That night, I sat on my mattress, the binder of my business plan open but forgotten. The moonlight through the blinds carved stripes across the pages. A notification dinged, a rejection email from a local small business pitch contest. No funding. I closed my laptop, rested my head on my knees, and let the silence press in. In the darkness, I imagined Grandma Maggie's studio, her gentle voice telling me I was seen. I imagined Dr. Carter's steady encouragement, and the countless nights I'd sacrifice sleep for spreadsheets and sketches. My dreams weren't less valid. They were simply too different for my family to understand. And so in that moment between disappointment and resolve, I made a choice. I would prove them wrong, but I would do it on my own terms. The true betrayal came not just from exclusion, but from the moment they revealed a secret that shattered any hope of family loyalty. I didn't see it coming. The invitation said, family meeting, casual and vague, scheduled for Friday, May 2nd at 6 p.m. at our parents' house. I assumed it was to celebrate our graduation and Maddie's Stanford acceptance, more of the same polite acknowledgments I'd grown accustomed to. I arrived early, my binder of investor contacts in hand, determination simmering beneath my calm exterior. Mom was standing in the foyer, her hands neatly folded, while Dad sat at the head of the long mahogany table, leaflets for Maddie's events spread before him. Maddie lounged on the sofa, thumbing through her acceptance package from Stanford, her grin radiant. Their smiles felt rehearsed, like actors playing out a script I'd never auditioned for. I set my binder down and forced a polite "thank you" for inviting me, hoping my voice didn't betray me. Ed cleared his throat. "Sarah," he began, glancing at Mom, "we have something important to share tonight." My pulse quickened. After weeks of silence about my startup, did they finally decide to help? I leaned forward. "I'm ready to discuss my seed funding," I said, flicking to the page in my binder labeled Angel Investor Leads. Mom exchanged a look with Dad. "Not exactly," she said softly. "We called this meeting because we finalized Grandma Maggie's estate settlement." My stomach dropped. Grandma Maggie had passed 6 months earlier, leaving behind her lake house, her studio, and a family trust. I'd assumed her will split everything equally between Maddie and me, her 2 granddaughters, her pride and joy. Instead, Dad slid a thick envelope across the table toward me. I opened it to reveal legal paperwork. The amended Hayes Family Trust dated 3 weeks ago. My breath caught as I read the summary page. Beneficiary allocation, Madison Maddie Thompson. 100% of net trust assets, including $250,000, 0 cents cash, the Lake Evergreen property, and all art studio equipment. Sarah Thompson, no allocation. My vision blurred. I looked up at Dad, my heart pounding so loudly I feared he'd hear it. "This can't be right," I managed, voice trembling. "Grandma would never—" "You changed it?" I glanced at Mom, searching her face for any sign of remorse. Instead, she offered a tight smile. "Your sister needed it more," she said. "Her future is at Stanford. She has a $120,000, 0 cents tuition. Thought it fair to use Grandma's legacy to secure her education." Maddie's smile faltered as she recognized my shock. "Sarah, I thought Grandma promised us both equal shares," she stammered. "Why didn't you tell me?" Dad cleared his throat. "The attorney explained that, given your independent scholarship efforts, you're well on your way. Maddie needs a full nest egg." His hand rested on Maddie's. "You'll be the executor of the estate." Executor. I closed my eyes and saw Grandma's gentle face, her encouragement in the little studio shed, her promise that both her granddaughters were equally bright. That promise had been erased, scribbled out by their better judgment. I opened my eyes, voice low and steady. "So you signed these papers without telling me? Behind my back?" Mom shrugged, as though I'd asked why the sky was blue. "We spoke to the lawyer. We made the decision that benefits the one who needs it most." Anger and humiliation collided in my chest. I felt the years of polite applause and whispered "good job, Sarah" crash down around me. Their version of fairness was choosing Maddie every time. I rose from my chair, the floorboards creaking under my weight. "This isn't fair, it's betrayal," my words echoed in the silent room. Dad's face darkened. "Sarah, calm down. You have scholarships and grants. You've never asked us for help. Don't make this about being fair. This is about responsibility."
"Responsibility?" I shot back. "You talk about responsibility, yet you're responsible for stealing my inheritance, for turning Grandma's legacy into a political favor." Maddie stood as well, reaching out but hesitating. "Sarah," I held up a hand. "Don't. I trusted you. I thought family meant equal shares of love and support. Apparently I was wrong." Mom's voice cracked. "We love you both, but this was the best way to support Maddie's future." I laughed, a short, hollow sound. "Support? You supported her by handing her everything Grandma left, and you supported me by reminding me I'm on my own." My binder lay abandoned on the table. My plan, my dreams relegated to second-class status in my own family. A sudden clatter from the kitchen startled us. Dad shot to his feet. "It's dinner," he said briskly, as if nothing had happened. He laid out plates of casserole and mashed potatoes. "Come eat." I stared at the food without moving. I realized then that this betrayal cut deeper than just money. It cut the ties that bound me to the family I built my identity around. I wasn't just disinherited, I was dismissed. Maddie approached, voice soft. Sarah, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. But I couldn't trust her apology, not when she'd accepted this windfall without protest. I turned away. Save it, I said. I'll come find you when I'm done. I left the house without eating, stepping into the cool spring night. The streetlights flickered as I walked down the driveway, my shoes crunching on gravel. My mind spun. If this was how they saw me, unworthy of Grandma's final gift, then I would take what was truly mine, my talent, my vision, my unbreakable drive. I realized in that moment of betrayal that my real inheritance wasn't a check or a house. It was every hour I'd poured into my art, every sleepless night I'd spent refining my pitch, every bit of courage Grandma Maggie had instilled in me. And I vowed, they may have stolen my trust and my inheritance, but they could never steal my will. I thought this betrayal was the lowest point, until I woke the next morning feeling more lost than ever. I woke the next morning, still wearing last night's dress, stiff and cold against my studio apartment floor, but I felt only darkness. My head throbbed with the remnants of tears, and my chest tightened as though someone had wrapped a rope around it. The betrayal from the night before, my parents silently reassigning Grandma Maggie's entire estate to Maddie, had hollowed me out. I moved like a ghost, my limbs heavy and unresponsive. I stumbled to the bathroom and flicked on the light. The mirror showed a stranger, eyes bloodshot and haunted, cheeks blotched where tears had dried. My reflection mouthed, "What did you do?" I pressed my palms to the cool sink, willing myself to focus. But my mind looped over Dad's calm voice, Maddie's stunned apology. Each replay sent fresh waves of grief crashing over me. I retreated to my mattress on the floor, hugging my knees. I thought of Grandma Maggie's face when she praised my watercolor of the campus lake. I remembered her gentle whisper, "Your creativity is a gift." And I realized that gift felt worthless now, invalidated by my own family. I wanted to scream at them, to make them hear the injustice that reverberated through every fiber of my being. But instead, all I managed was a tremor of breath. Time lost meaning. I vaguely recall checking my phone for messages, nothing except a "Congrats sis" text from Maddie, oblivious to the storm she'd ignited. No calls from Dad or Mom asking if I was okay. No, sorry from anyone. Just silence that rang so loud it hurt. By mid-morning, I dragged myself into the kitchen to make coffee. I measured grounds with shaky fingers, the counter streaked with yesterday's dust. The coffee machine sputtered and steamed. I waited as though it might brew solace. When the hot mug was in my hands, I carried it back to the bedroom and curled up again, letting the warmth seep into cold bones. An hour later, I heard a knock. It was Olivia Liv, my best friend since childhood. She'd seen my posts about the meeting and drove 30 miles to check on me. She knocked again, softer this time. I didn't answer. She opened the door and stepped inside, her face tight with concern. "Sarah," she said quietly, "please let me in." I lowered my mug and slid to the edge of the bed. Liv sat beside me, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. "They did what?" she asked, exhaling sharply. I told her everything. The amended trust, Maddie's full inheritance, the cold words Mom and Dad used to justify it. Liv's hand tightened. "That's betrayal," she said, pure and simple. I closed my eyes and let my tears flow again. In Liv's arms, the dam broke. I sobbed without restraint, tears for the stolen inheritance, tears for the broken promise of family, tears for the years I'd devoted to proving my worth. Liv whispered assurances I barely heard, stroking my hair. But even her comfort couldn't patch the wound that ran too deep. When I finally pulled away, Liv's eyes were red but determined. "You can't stay here in this state," she said. "Let me take you out. Fresh air. We'll talk strategy." I wiped my cheeks. "I don't have any strategy," I said, voice raw. "They've made it clear I'm on my own." She shook her head. "No, they don't get to decide that. You still have skills, resources." Her eyes flicked to my laptop on the desk. "And you've got option." But I couldn't muster hope. My vision of launching my agency felt absurd when my own parents refused to back me, yet funneled every resource into Maddie. Liv stood and held out her hand. "Please," she urged, "for me." I hesitated, but there was strength in her gaze I hadn't felt in days. I let her lead me outside into the morning air. The world felt too bright, the sky a cruel reminder of how unclouded life could be for Maddie. I wrapped my arms around myself, shivering despite the warmth. We walked in silence until we reached a small park near my apartment. Liv sat on a bench and pulled me down beside her. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then she said, "You're not defined by their choices, you're defined by yours." I stared at her, feeling both the sting of betrayal and the ember of resolve ignite within me. She continued, "I'll help you. Whatever you need, office space, connections, even a couch to crash on. But you can't let them break you." I nodded, wiping my nose. The tears slowed, replaced by a heavy ache. I realized I'd been drifting since the meeting, adrift in pain, without anchor or compass. But Liv was offering me both. We spent the afternoon drafting a plan. Liv sketched ideas on a napkin, a lean startup model, crowdfunding campaigns, local small business pitch nights she'd heard about. That evening, I returned to my apartment and opened my laptop. I uploaded my revised pitch deck to a crowdfunding site, set a modest goal of $20,000, 0 cents for essential equipment, and wrote a heartfelt story about Grandma Maggie's legacy, honoring her support rather than exposing my family's betrayal. Below that, I thanked Liv for being my rock. When I hit publish, I felt a flicker of power. It wasn't the money that mattered as much as reclaiming agency over my own future. I'd been stripped of an inheritance, but I hadn't lost my voice, my skills, or my determination. As I shut the laptop, exhaustion washed over me. But it was the kind of exhaustion that follows action, the opposite of the paralyzing fatigue I'd felt since the meeting. I climbed into bed and closed my eyes, allowing myself to hope that morning would bring something more than grief. The next spark of recovery came from an unlikely source, a message that arrived just as I was about to lose faith completely. I woke the next morning to the gentle buzz of my phone's alarm, but it wasn't the alarm that caught my attention. It was the headline in my email inbox. "Let's talk strategy. Read the subject line from Dr. Samuel Carter." My heart thudded against my ribcage as I opened his message. He'd spotted my crowdfunding campaign for $50,000, 0 cents, and immediately forwarded it to a contact of his, Mark Reynolds, a partner at Horizon Ventures. Mark was intrigued by my story and wanted to discuss a $25,000, 0 cents, bridge investment to help me secure essential equipment, plus access to Westfield's new founder-in-residence workspace rent-free for 6 months. I replayed those words in my head, scarcely believing them. After everything I'd been through, feeling invisible in my own family, fighting for scraps of support, here was someone offering not just money, but a seat at the table. I grabbed my laptop and dialed Liv without hesitation. "Sam's friend wants to invest," I blurted. There was a beat of stunned silence on her end, then Liv squealed in joy. "That's exactly the spark you needed," she said. By that afternoon, we'd transformed my cramped studio apartment into a war room. Liv scavenged whiteboards from the library, and I taped sheets of paper to the walls, each one covered in arrows, timelines, and scribbled budgets. Instead of listing line items in neat bullet points, I wove them into a narrative. How I'd allocate roughly $12,000 to upgrade our design suite with industry-standard software and hardware. How $5,000 would equip the founder and residence office with ergonomic furniture and fast internet. And how the remaining funds would cover 2 part-time junior designers at $3,000 each per month for 3 months. Enough human capital to land our first 5 paying clients by year's end. That evening, I rehearsed my pitch at Dr. Carter's Entrepreneurship Center. Sunlight poured through the loft's industrial windows as I narrated my journey. The pine-scented Christmas at Grandma Maggie's lake house. The quiet desperation of balancing 20 credit hours and 35 work hours a week, and the bone-deep resolve born from my family's betrayal. I watched the investors' eyes as I spoke, noting when they leaned in at the story of my self-financed education, and when they scribbled furiously at the financial projections, projected revenues of $120,000 0 cents in year 1, scaling to $300,000 0 cents the next. When I finished, my voice steady, my slides glowing on the screen, Dr. Carter offered me a warm smile. "Mark will want to meet you next week," he said. That night, I didn't sleep, but it wasn't the cold knot of anxiety that kept me awake. It was the electric buzz of possibility. Over the next few days, I handled my crowdfunding update as if I were writing a letter to Grandma Maggie, helpful, concise, and brimming with gratitude. I wove my financial realities into the narrative without resorting to a dry list explaining that each donation, whether $10 or $1,000, would directly fuel the creation of brand identities for small businesses in Detroit and Ann Arbor. Businesses that couldn't afford a full-price agency. By the time I met Mark Reynolds in his sleek, glass-walled office overlooking campus, my campaign was already halfway to its goal. Mark greeted me with a firm handshake and cool professionalism. He asked the tough questions: what our client acquisition cost looked like, how we differentiate ourselves in a crowded market, and what contingency plans we had if initial revenue fell short. I spoke of the niche I'd carved by targeting community-focused startups, of the 8 discovery calls I'd already scheduled that week, and of the partnerships Liv had lined up with student organizations for referral programs. Each answer reinforced that this wasn't a hobby. It was a calculated, confident venture. When Mark signed off on the $25,000 0 cents investment that evening, I felt a surge of vindication. I'd been disinherited, dismissed, and underestimated, but here was proof that my vision and my resilience were more valuable than any family inheritance could have been. By the time I moved into my founder-in-residence desk the following Monday, I'd already restructured my budget to stretch every dollar further. I rented a small conference room by the hour instead of paying for permanent space. I negotiated software licenses at academic rates, and I offered equity-based incentives to 2 junior designers eager for portfolio work. I no longer saw the world through the narrow lens of scarcity that my parents imposed. Instead, I saw leverage every way I turned. Late that week, I called Maddie. "I closed the bridge funding and have workspace for 6 months," I said. Her response was polite but distant, a reminder that our paths were now irrevocably parallel rather than intertwined. And that was fine. This was about me now. As I wrapped up the week, I sat at my desk, overlooking the entrepreneurial hub, the hum of other founders typing and brainstorming around me. My campaign had surged to 75% of its goal, and I'd already confirmed 3 small business clients for Q1. For the first time in months, I felt hope not as a desperate wish, but as a reliable force under my control. Tonight, I'll update my supporters one more time, weaving every technical detail into the narrative of Grandma Maggie's legacy and my commitment to repay her faith with results. Then, I'll close my eyes, exhausted but exhilarated, knowing that tomorrow I'll wake up and keep building on my terms with my team and with resources I earned. With resources secured and momentum on my side, I planned my first real move against my family's expectations, a move so unexpected it would make even their carefully calibrated confidence falter. I arrived at my first official family event since graduation, with a calm mask firmly in place. It was the annual summer barbecue at my parents' house, complete with Dad manning the grill, Maddie flitting between social circles, and Mum greeting guests in her pastel sundress. Underneath the polite smiles and casual chatter, I felt the old ache of invisibility. But tonight, I wasn't here to blend into the background. I came armed with proof of my success, and a carefully timed reveal that would shift the dynamic forever. The sun was just dipping below the horizon when I slipped into the backyard, carrying two large portfolios, one labeled Sarah Thompson Studies, the other Agency Projection Report. I'd rehearse every line, every pause, ensuring the impact would land exactly as planned. My first stop was the picnic table where Dad was pouring plastic cups of lemonade. I set the case studies portfolio in front of him. His eyebrows rose. "What's this?" he asked. I took a measured breath. "I thought you might be interested in the brand I've already launched." I opened the binder to a glossy spread showcasing a local cafe's before and after rebrand. A new logo, packaging mock-ups, and a 30% bump in their monthly foot traffic. Dad flipped the pages, his poker face slipping for the first time. Maddie hovered behind him, curiosity piqued. Next I approached Mum, who was chatting with her book club friends under the porch awning. I handed her the Agency Projection Report, highlighting my 3-year forecast: $120,000, 0 cents in year 1, $300,000, 0 cents in year 2, and a 40% profit margin by year 3. I pointed to the section showing secured funding: $25,000, 0 cents from Horizon Ventures, 75% of my $50,000, 0 cents crowdfunding goal met, and commitments from 5 businesses for Q1 deliverables. Her polite smile faltered into genuine surprise. Maddie found me moments later, clearing her throat. "So you really did it," she said quietly. Under the string lights, I met her gaze without flinching. "And I'm just getting started." I let that hang as I slipped away to find Dr. Carter, who'd agreed to attend as my mentor under the pretense of a professional networking dinner. I waved him over. Within minutes, he was guiding conversations around my tables, praising my strategic acumen to anyone who listened. As twilight deepened, I invited my parents and Maddie to follow me to the deck. I set up my laptop on a small outdoor table, the screen reflecting in their curious eyes. Without preamble, I clicked through a slideshow. Testimonials from clients praising on-time deliveries and creative excellence. Screenshots of crowdfunding backers leaving messages of encouragement, and a news blurb from the local business journal naming me top emerging digital agency in Westfield. Every slide earned nods and murmurs. When the last slide faded, projected expansion, Detroit, Chicago, and beyond. I closed the laptop and looked at them directly. "I did all this without your help," I said softly, voice carrying in the warm night air. Dad swallowed. Mum's hand flew to her mouth. Maddie's eyes brimmed with a mixture of pride and regret. I continued. "You chose to invest every dollar Grandma Maggie left into Maddie's education, believing she needed it more. Meanwhile, I built my agency from scratch, pitching, coding, designing, and negotiating partnerships. I turned nothing into something. Their silence was my amplifier. I let it sit. Then I offered a gentle olive branch. I'm not here to rub it in. I want to show you what I can do, and maybe, in time, you'll see that I deserved Grandma's faith just as much. I closed my eyes briefly, recalling her encouraging words. Don't let anyone dull your shine. Now, they faced the brightness I had honed in secret. Maddie stepped forward, voice trembling. I'm so proud of you, she managed. I'm sorry I never saw how hard you were working. I nodded, accepting her apology in the only way I knew how, by inviting her into my world. If you'd like, I said, I'm hiring an intern this fall. The role's unpaid, but I offer real mentorship, and I'd love for you to learn what my job really entails. Her gratitude was palpable. Dad cleared his throat. Sarah, this is remarkable. I was wrong to overlook you. He glanced at Mom, who gave a small nod of agreement. We want to support you moving forward, he said. I let them believe they'd won me over at least partially. Inside, I celebrated silently. I had achieved not only external validation, but also shifted the power balance in our family dynamic. They could no longer dismiss me as the overlooked daughter. I had become their success story. The rest of the evening passed in a blissful blur of congratulations and plans for family referrals. Dad wanted me to rebrand his golf league. Mom offered to host my next pitch event, and Maddie promised to help me prototype new packaging ideas. I listened, sensing that this fragile reconciliation rested on my continued momentum. As I packed up my laptop and portfolios later that night, I reflected on how far I'd come. From the puzzled looks at the family meeting to commanding respect beneath string light. I'd turned their casual barbecue into my stage on which I delivered the performance of a lifetime, one that rewrote every scripted role they'd assigned me. But behind the applause lay a hidden scene. The price my family would pay for condoning Grandma Maggie's forgotten promise. And how that quiet cost would trigger their undoing. 1 year after that barbecue, I found myself standing in a gleaming, converted warehouse on East Main Street, our new headquarters for Sarah Thompson Creative. It was a crisp Tuesday morning, and sunlight streamed through 15-foot windows onto polished concrete floors. Around me buzzed 15 team members, junior designers sketching logos, copywriters debating taglines, and account managers mapping out social media calendars. At the far end, Liv coached 2 interns through a pitch rehearsal for a bakery client in Kalamazoo. As I watched, I thought back to the day Liv first knocked on my door, determined to pull me out of my grief. She'd sat me down on my mattress on the floor and insisted, "You're not alone in this." That simple act of loyalty had transformed my collapse into a comeback. Within months, she'd gone from best friend to indispensable partner, handling operations so I could focus on creative direction. By mid-year, we'd landed our first corporate contract, a $60,000 0 cents brand overhaul for a regional organic food co-op that tripled their web traffic and boosted membership by 45%. I still have the thank you email from the co-op's director pinned to my office corkboard. "You captured our mission with more heart than we ever imagined." Behind the scenes, our Fresh Start Fund campaign, spearheaded by Liv, raised $40,000, 0 cents, to support small businesses recovering from local floods. We matched each donation with pro bono design work, strengthening community ties and generating press coverage in the Westfield Gazette. That earned us an invitation to speak at the Michigan Small Business Conference, where I shared the stage with state legislators and pitched the idea of a public private mentorship program for young entrepreneurs. On slow afternoons, I'd retreat to Grandma Maggie's old art easel, now displayed in our break room, and sketch new concepts with charcoal. Team members would pause to offer feedback, transforming what began as a personal ritual into a collaborative creative exercise. It reminded me that even as I scaled up, the core of our success lay in the spark Grandma had ignited in me. Creativity woven with courage. Last month, we celebrated our 1-year anniversary with a rooftop party, string lights, local food trucks, and a projection of that pivotal family barbecue presentation on the brick wall. As I raised a glass of sparkling cider, I realized that this side story of friendship, community impact, and personal rituals was more than a bonus insight. It was proof that the journey from betrayal to triumph was fueled not only by resolve, but by the unexpected allies and moments that shape our greatest victories. But as our reputation soared, an unexpected scandal began to bubble, one that would expose the true cost of my family's choices and set the stage for their downfall. The ripple began subtly. A local reporter, tipped off by one of my early pro bono clients from the Fresh Start Fund campaign, reached out to me for background on small bricks branding. I granted an interview, framing the narrative around community resilience and Grandma Maggie's legacy. A week later, the Westfield Gazette ran a front-page story: how Sarah Thompson built a $300 0-cents K agency from scratch and left her family relieving. The headline stung, but I stayed focused on the real story: how I turned betrayal into opportunity. Within days, inquiries poured in, emails from mid-sized companies seeking rebrands, invitations to industry panels, and even a podcast offer from Detroit Startup Weekly. My phone buzzed 20 times an hour. Meanwhile, at the Thompson household, I imagined the shockwaves, the same family that once dismissed me as independent, now watching my name in lights. That weekend, at a charity gala where I was keynote speaker, I overheard Josh Miller, my mother's book club friend and now gala sponsor, whisper to another patron, "Isn't it awkward for her parents, funding one daughter's master's, then watching the other surpass her?" The man nodded, smirking. "Karma's a beautiful thing." I allowed myself a small, victorious smile. Back home, I monitored my agency's analytics. Web traffic had doubled in a fortnight, and our mailing list grew by 1,200 subscribers. But more satisfying was the social media reaction to the Gazette article, comments praising my tenacity and calling out my family's missed priorities. Screenshots circulated in local business groups, and a trending hashtag, Team Sarah, began to take shape. The pressure on my parents and Maddie was mounting, though I never orchestrated it directly. I simply kept doing my work, letting their complicity with Grandma Maggie's erased promise unravel in public view. A fortnight later, my father called. He sounded uneasy. "Sarah, we saw the article, the comments." I kept my tone neutral. "I'm glad the community appreciates my work." He cleared his throat. "Your mother's upset. She feels people are being unfair." I paused. "Here's something people don't know," I said softly. "When you redirected Grandma Maggie's $250,000 0-cent trust, you also homesteaded her lake house, selling off all her art supplies. You disposed of her easel and paintings." A long silence followed. "We thought the house was too big for us," Dad finally stammered. "We sold it, and you never told me," I replied. "You sold my grandmother's legacy for an extra $25,000 in pure profit." His sigh echoed through the line, and I realized I'd struck a deeper nerve than any public article could. "That's betrayal on a different level," I continued. "And now it's out there too." He hung up without another word. I let the phone fall into my lap, heart pounding. The angle was clear, the estate documents were public record. I'd confirmed everything with a quick search of county filings, proof that they'd profited twice, first by disinheriting me, and then by liquidating Grandma's creative treasures. Within 24 hours, that detail had spread online. Comments turned from admiration for me to outrage toward them. How could they? That's despicable. Shame on the Thompsons. The wave crested and crashed against the Thompson name. Maddie reached out next, an email that began cautiously. Sarah, I'm so sorry about what they did. I had no idea they sold Grandma's art studio items. I wish I could make it right. I typed back a reply, offering her a chance to help catalog the remaining family heirlooms, positioning her as an ally in repair rather than another antagonist. She accepted, and I copied her on a spreadsheet listing every surviving photograph, letter, and piece of furniture from Grandma's estate. Together, we began restoring those artifacts for donation to the Westfield Historical Society, an act that publicly underscored the contrast between my integrity and our parents' misdeeds. By the time the Westfield Historical Society held its legacy exhibition, with all proceeds benefiting small business grants, my parents received another public rebuke. County residents, now aware of the Thompson cover-up, criticized their decisions from the exhibition's dating. I watched the live stream, my mother blinking back tears, my father fidgeting as neighbors whispered. I felt no glee in their discomfort, and that I'd help set things right. That night, my phone lit up with congratulatory messages not only for my exhibition accolades, but for spearheading the estate's healing. My agency closed an additional $75,000, 0 cents in contract within 24 hours. And through it all, I realized the greatest downfall my family faced wasn't public shame or lost heirlooms. It was the restoration of the moral order Grandma Maggie had intended. They had tried to silence her promise of equal support, but in elevating my story, the community had rekindled her true legacy. Now, as the dust settles, I find myself at a crossroads, one where forgiveness and forward momentum collide in the most unexpected way. I never expected that reclaiming my agency would bring me back to the family table, this time on my own terms. After the Westfield Historical Society exhibition exposed my parents' handling of Grandma Maggie's estate, our relationship shifted from resentment to a fraught reconciliation. Yet even as they offered small gestures, a shared lunch at a neutral cafe, Dad's awkward, "We want to support you now" line, I realized that forgiveness wouldn't be a single moment, but an ongoing choice. Over that meal, I listened as Mom and Dad admitted their favoritism, acknowledging that they'd misjudged my potential. It wasn't easy to hear we were wrong, but owning that mistake opened a door. I told them I was willing to build a new relationship, one grounded not in past expectations, but in mutual respect. They agreed that moving forward, our bond would need clear boundaries. They would ask before offering financial help, and I would define the kind of emotional support I needed. Honest interest, rather than polite applause. In the weeks that followed, I learned the power of setting those boundaries. When my parents asked to co-host a small launch party for my agency's expansion into Chicago, I welcomed their presence, but kept control over the guest list and program. I drafted an agenda, assigned them roles. Mom would greet attendees, Dad would introduce our keynote, and I made sure they understood that their task was to support, not overshadow. It was a subtle shift, but it cemented my role as leader, not overlooked daughter. Forgiveness, I discovered, wasn't about erasing pain. It was about releasing the expectation that the past could have been different. During a Saturday hike with Lily, she asked if I would ever fully forgive our parents. We stood at a scenic overlook, autumn leaves burning orange around us. I told her forgiveness felt more like breathing out, letting go of resentment to make room for something new. I won't forget, I said, but I'm choosing not to carry that weight anymore. Lily squeezed my hand, and I realized that sisterhood had become my truest family bond. Professionally, I poured these lessons into the first-generation achievement scholarship I founded at Westfield University's business school. Using a portion of my agency's profits, the endowment supports students who, like me, balanced work and dad and mom attended, visibly proud but also humbled. They saw their daughter no longer waiting for permission to shine. My agency continued to thrive. By 10th month, we'd opened an office in Detroit, hired 6 full-time staff, and increased annual revenue by 60%. Each milestone reaffirmed that my worth wasn't contingent on family approval, but on the value I created. I learned to celebrate successes quietly, then share them confidently. No more waiting for a nod of recognition from voices that once dismissed me. Looking back, the deepest lesson was about self-permanation. I spent years seeking a signal from my parents that I was enough. What I lacked was faith in myself. Once I stopped chasing their approval and started honoring my own efforts, everything changed. The respect I earned from clients, colleagues, and mentors became the true measure of my success. Their belief validated my skills and affirmed that my path, though hard, was worth every sacrifice. Resilience became my quiet superpower. I channeled disappointment into determination, betrayal into boldness, and rejection into resourcefulness. I learned to see constraints not as roadblocks, but as catalysts for creativity. Grandma Maggie's voice echoed in every challenge. Don't let anyone dull your shine. It was the encouragement I needed when my family's faith faltered. Finally, I embraced the importance of boundaries in all relationships. I recognized that love isn't measured by financial commitments or hollow praise, but by consistent, respectful support. I stopped excusing half-hearted gestures and started articulating what I needed, whether it was honest feedback on a pitch deck or someone simply asking about my day. Those boundaries protected my energy. If there's one takeaway from my story, it's this: your value exists independently of others' ability to recognize it. External validation can sweeten victory. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If my story of overcoming family expectations and rediscovering self-worth resonated with you, hit like and subscribe for more stories that celebrate resilience, empowerment, and the power of owning your narrative.